Broadcasting live to the world. Now, it's Sheila Zilinsky.
This is a very sinister Luciferian eugenics plan. These spineless weasels preach what people want to hear. They replace repentance with dreams of the good life. Mindless minions. Dying daily, taking up your cross, suffering and sacrificing have been superseded with name it and claim it. And as dark as I know it looks out there, the good news is that God is advancing his kingdom. And it's very exciting to be a part of his Great Commission.
It's Sheila Zilinsky. The Sheila Zilinsky Show, the only show to give you the truth behind the headlines, prophecy, and the deeper things of God. Now, here is your host, end-time watchwoman, Sheila Zilinsky.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to this Tuesday, July 28th, 2015 edition of the Sheila Zilinsky Show. I broadcast weekdays, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on Worldwide Christian Radio. You may notice, folks, that the website has had some changes. It is a lot more streamlined. Please do refresh your browser for those that have not done that. And you'll notice that the guest bios have moved down a little bit on the page. So that little ticker at the top left of the website has the guest for today. Also, don't forget that my book has hit Amazon.com. You'll want to order a copy of that. Green Gospel, the New World Religion. greengospel.ca is the website. So do get your hands on my book. If you missed yesterday's show with Dave Hodges called Jade Helm, The Plot Thickens, please do go back and listen to the first couple minutes of the show, and I tell you how you can win a personally signed copy to you of my book, Green Gospel. Do check that out. So 4 people are going to win a copy of my book, Green Gospel, and that again is personally signed to you from me. It's a great thing because, of course, you can't get signed copies. So I'm looking forward to you winning a copy of my book. If you haven't already done so, please go to my website and sign up for my podcast. There is a pink button on the right-hand side there that says Follow Sheila on Podomatic, and that is how you sign up for my podcast. And just a reminder that a podcast website was taken down. It said Sheila Zilinsky's podcast site on YouTube. It was not my site, and it was taken down. So if you want to listen to my official podcast, you do need to sign up for that. Just click that button on the right, follow me, and you can have access to all the latest archives. We have a fantastic program tonight, folks. My guest really needs no introduction, but for the new listeners, it's the highly acclaimed author, researcher, and watchman extraordinaire, Steve Quayle from stevequayle.com. We're going to get into what's going on with gold, the economy, and so much more. And I've noticed an interesting theme here, Steve. No guns, no gold, and no God allowed. The Illuminists are making sure we have none of those things. Steve, welcome back to the program. It is so good to have you back on.
Well, thank you, Sheila, and a pretty good description of where we're at today. One of the things I really want to hit right off the top of the show is the disconnect between world events and how the Christians see the world. And by this, I'm saying reflected in mainstream Christianity, their acquiescence to basically the dictates of hell. Those are my words, so don't get mad at Sheila over that. But let's take it a step at a time. First of all, the butchering that's going on of babies in this country, I think, is the greatest indictment that anyone could ever imagine. You know, it's almost unfathomable to me how there has been no larger uproar, because these are little people. And the little people, I mean, we all started out that way. So while we're watching what I would call just the binge butchery, and that's what I'm now calling the sale of baby parts, okay? As you and I have discussed both on air and off the air, the words no longer seem to affect anybody's psyche or their ability to understand how horrific it is. People will shake their heads, they'll, nod and maybe even shake them back and forth, or just put their eyes down to the ground. But we're watching, if you will, the fullest presentation of the courts in heaven laying out their charges against the human race. Because one of the things I come up against, and I have since being on talk radio for, a quarter of a century, is the fact that people still don't understand, number one, that God is holy, number two, that he has judged nations in history, number three, there's a life cycle of almost every world empire and civilization, number four, that when you start seeing sexual perversion and perversity and everything else, it brings you right back to the days of Caligula. It brings us back to the fall of Rome, and we're not going to talk about that today, but let's take it in the economic realm. The greatest disconnect that I know, Sheila, and having done this for 25 years, is watching the world events so horrific, so bloody, so gory, but everyone goes on with life as usual. And that's what the globalists, illuminists, and Satanists have counted on, pandered to, in order to keep people unable to think, and more importantly, destroy their will to act. I think it was Hitler who said it's a good thing for us that people don't think anymore. So while we're talking about the disconnect, let's just talk about, we know Bible prophecy. Christians will quote it, but then they have almost the attitude, well, they won't be here to live to see it, and they're seeing it unfold before their eyes. I believe that we are truly in the start of the Great Tribulation. I don't think we're in the birth pangs anymore. I believe that we are starting the Great Tribulation. Whether people want to argue about September, 2 months from now being it or whatever, all I'm saying is when we watch 250,000 of our brethren or more, who knows the real number, butchered, when we see the anomaly in the administration not speaking out against that, but never not speaking out against the butchering of Christians, yet pandering to the Islamic radicals, ISIS being, literally tied to our White House, tied to our Defense Department. People have got to understand the war against Christians is on. You don't have to suggest it, Sheila. You don't have to I don't have to. What we have to do is basically get people to open their eyes, and unfortunately only the Holy Spirit can do that, because people have a covenant with death. Go ahead.
You're right. I mean, this is not a drill. The storm cloud isn't coming. It's not over on the horizon. It's now above our head. God is not going to be mocked. When you have a society where selling baby parts for the highest price is order of the day, a statue of Satan and the colors of sodomy rule the day, burning and banning the flags okay, and shredding the Constitution and spitting on the Bible is considered sane and normal? What has happened, Steve?
Well, the whole issue is that we're seeing the giving over of our entire nations to the idols it worships, okay? And one of the greatest tragedies in the history of the world is the fact that this land, once so blessed by Almighty God, once the jewel of the world, once the nation looked up to, once the seeming those who stood for righteousness, now is the leading purveyor of perversion. And I think it's important, Sheila, that people understand that in order to comprehend the whole Islamic rise to dominance worldwide and their absolute contempt for Christianity and the butcher, the murder, the slaughter, and I believe that slaughter takes place obviously in the abortion clinics across America. But the point being is that there is the lack of understanding that in Islamic prophecy they must have a world war in order to bring upon the return of their Mahdi. I suggest that with the praising and integration of Islam in the United States, that's why our U.S. military is being destroyed, and it has been. The regular military is being destroyed. if I can't get anybody's attention, or you can't, with this statement, 238,000 veterans have been allowed to die or denied medical treatment in the last, let's say, half a dozen years or less. What will get people's attention? I'll tell you what will get people's attention. When they go to the ATM card machine, and seriously, it doesn't work. Right. When they go to their credit card machine and it doesn't work. The great disconnect is that Christians somehow believe they're going to be able to keep their faith, keep their jobs, keep their pensions, keep their lifestyle, and basically be overlooked by the people that are going to take their life away, take their lifestyle away, take their stuff away. You follow me? And so the day your stuff doesn't matter anymore, I guess what I'm trying to say is the disconnect, especially, I hear this all the time, Sheila, well, gold and silver are down. Well, the point being is that gold and silver were used as the alternative medium when we have to run for our lives, leave the country, do wherever we got to go, okay? Yeah. Because you're sure not going to be able to go with your Visa or your, Mark a Beast card and get money from your ATM. When the announcement has been made that there's been a cohesive and orchestrated cyber attack upon the banks and financial institutions and brokerage firms, and they don't work, okay? In essence, there's nothing to withdraw. I want to give everyone a little test, and you can chime in too. I mean, chime in. Thank you for yielding to me on this, but me, I've got like 4,000 hours of stuff to get out in 40 minutes. But the point being, we've gotten now the total recipe for bringing America to its knees. Remember, you used to hear all the time, Sheila, that the consumer spending fueled the economy?
Yes.
Remember that? That's why they always were, consumer price index and all the stats and the Baltic Dry. How much stuff were people buying? Well, Walmarts are being closed, being turned into prison camps, no longer beyond denial. Okay, if there's any plumbing issue, it's only to wash down the body fluids and the dissolved body parts or ashes. The point being is that all of the indications are that we are under full-scale preparation. It goes beyond Jade Helm. That's just basically taking domination over the human domain. When I saw that, it sounds, good. Some artificial intelligence masterpiece came up with that. Mastering the human domain. I would expect that to be the Terminator's, inscription on his ring. So the point being is that we are now seeing the total, breakdown of the consumer economy, the destruction of the middle class, the destruction of the American dream that used to be a single-family earner, could buy a home, raise a family, have some retirement, and put his kid through college. Well, what do you tell a college student when you see that the student loans are approaching $1 trillion? At some point, those will have to be forgiven. But there are no jobs. And I just put up some articles today, and for the record, this is the 28th of July, of how many illegal immigrants and how many unemployed people there are. And again, this is called displacement, okay? One of the biblical curses is strangers from without will possess you from within. Our country is no longer owned. People would be surprised who owns America. It's not just the big brokerage firms. It's not the giant octopus Goldman Sachs. It's not the giant manipulators, J.P. Morgan. What it is it's everybody from China owning the national parks, owning the majority of real estate in commercial real estate in New York and in Seattle and in San Francisco, and all of the foreigners that have come in to basically buy up everything, because we are on fire, and I mean that literally, consumed with our own lusts, our selfies. We have become, I would say this, we'll make Greek mythology, especially Narcissus, we'll make him look like he wasn't even a sparkle in a pond of water as the sun hits it. We are absolutely the most self-centered, egotistical, dumb unto death. What's the word I'm looking for?
Weak, gutless, slovenly, and apathetic?
Yep. A group that's ever been. So, saying all that, now let me ask you a question. Day one is, let's say, a Monday. Friday you went on your normal setup for the weekend, whether you went here or went there. Now, I'm speaking rhetorically, Sheila, so I don't mean you specifically, but I'm saying Okay, the person who they go home from their job, they got X number of dollars in the bank, they got X number of dollars in their 401ks, IRAs, benefit plans, whatever, and all of a sudden Sunday night, things start to fall apart in the overseas market, kind of like they did the last couple of weeks when China's stock market. Everybody knew it was a balloon ready to break, but have you noticed when balloons are ready to break, everybody still looks at the balloon filled with air, and then they panic after the thing's broken. The time to panic is like when the balloon is being blown up, and then you know it's going to pop. But setting that aside, look at what would happen, the chaos. So what happens, Sheila, and you spell it out, when John Doe or Mary Jo Doe goes to her bank and the ATM cards don't work, the bank is closed, there's been a cyber attack, what will people do? Well, the idea is that there will be nothing for them to do. Share what your thoughts are, because again, obviously, and as a very intelligent woman and as someone that knows what's going on, you relate to a lot of different people, either through email, on the phone, etc. But does it not surprise you that most people don't even begin to entertain those thoughts?
Well, you mentioned that disconnect, that word, and there is a normalcy bias, and maybe it's bystander apathy, cognitive dissonance. I guess the point is that everything is a carefully crafted stage of manipulation. The recent smash in gold and silver started again last Monday. The manipulation has become so in your face. The Dow Jones has been below 500 and 1,000 points. And one has to remember a single truth about gold prices at this time in history. The price is determined by a committee known as the London Gold Fix. Notice there's a manipulation even in that name, fix. And that is based solely on the paper market for gold and has little to do anymore with the physical gold market. And yet, no matter the dumping shares over the past week, and those, of course, Steve, have watched the cartel crash the spot price of gold in recent weeks, it's very easy to believe that capitulation may have finally arrived, but yet people don't get it. Forget the COMEX futures market and everything else, or JP Morgan severely leveraging their derivative exposure. We see all the shuck and jive going on. I mean, this is a breakdown, takedown, shakedown, and people just aren't getting it.
No, and remember, I think it was on your show or a show we were doing together where I said I had to coin the word reality avoidance syndrome. And the thing is that reality has been substituted in a virtual world. We're seeing the manipulation of our thoughts. We're seeing the manipulation of our bodies through the food we're eating. We're seeing dead doctors with cancer treatments. We're seeing people being assassinated. We're seeing every form of, I would say, this tyranny in the headlines daily, yet people don't get it. Let's take silver, okay? Silver is probably the most interesting and most controlled market in the world, even over gold. People should do their homework. The silver market has way less supply. Well, obviously, I've been in this business for 30 years, and this isn't a pitch. It's just a statement of understanding. It doesn't matter what the paper or notional value of silver is. It matters what people are willing to pay and want to pay to get silver. In the middle of this month, someone took delivery of $50 million worth of silver, which was 3.5 million ounces. Well, it doesn't take long for people to understand that if the biggest people that have manipulated the prices down by selling paper, and by the way, you can't do that in China. You can only do it in the United States, but the Chinese can take advantage as the big money brokers they force down the price of metals. They then come in, or their cronies, and buy it up at, amazing discounts, very highly discounted prices. And then at some point, they who have driven the market down to acquire all the physical metals will then make those physical metals available to the people again at, guess what, huge price increases. And that's the disconnect that we want to talk about today. Christians must understand they could never really embrace the idea of persecution unless it's, started someplace else. they never could embrace the fact that they won't be able to have jobs, hold jobs, or even live in the world they now live in if they want to hold their faith. The whole mark of the beast, when it comes in now, the technology of the beast is present, the mark is not. I want to just make it clear, you have to have the beast, the Antichrist, ruling, and his false prophet, which, by the way, is coming to the United Nations, the 23rd, 24th of September, that's the Pope, talking about a one-world government, a one-world religion, and a one-world economy where all of us will be equal, except some, of course, will be more equal. The point that Tom Horn and Chris Putnam have written about, obviously Petrus Romanus, whether this is the last pope or there's another one after him, the point is everything is in motion. We've heard rumors, and no longer rumors, from the military, from the intelligence, from the people that are really on the inside, and especially defense contractors. Defense contractors, people who build stuff and sell stuff, the military, they know what's going on. And we've heard that all this is building towards basically the introduction of the New World Order. And the New World Order is nothing more than the global reign and rule of Satan. Now, when the mark of the beast starts to be prominent and when the Antichrist desires worship concurrent with that will be God's two witnesses. And I don't believe that the church age or any of the nonsense that people have ascribed to. Those will be two literal prophets that will have the power to call down fire from heaven, to do all the whatever the Lord leads them to do and whatever their hearts desire to do, to prove to people. So here's the deal. Christians always say, well, what if I take it unknowingly? You can't, because free will not allow that, neither will God. So how do we deal with this? Especially in the metals market, okay? People don't get it. At some point, Christians will have to trade, barter, or be able to have something that even the devils that are and the world places value on. And contrary to the people that quote the scripture all the time, they'll throw their gold and silver into the street. Come, rich men, and howl. That's during the day of the Lord. Up until that point, in the book of Daniel, it talks about the Antichrist literally living and takes the gold and the silver and jewels for himself. That's something people always leave out, Sheila, Or they say, well, you trust in your gold or silver. No, I trust in the God who created it. God said he is against unjust measures. Well, here's the dichotomy. People that are locked in a paper mindset believe that the mindset is a godly thing, when obviously it's an unjust measure. Now, saying that, I understand we all have to use paper currency, et cetera, but when presented with an alternative, it's obviously something to consider. I'm the one, I think, that's been quoted the most over the years saying, if you can't touch it, you don't own it, okay? And that was proven even by some of the financial advisors who trusted depositories to hold their stuff. Now, those who have IRAs, 401ks, Keels and stuff, there's a way to get a self-directed IRA. You can hold your metals in the account. You hold it in your possession versus depositing with a third-party depository. But that door is going to close. Sheila, every day when I talk to clients or people from all over the country, they're saying that the financial institutions don't want to give them their money back. Well, that's why, because they don't realize one thing. After the change, when we came into 2015, now it's 7 months ago, there was a rule change. When you and I used to put money in a bank, we were secured depositors. If that bank went under, the FDIC would step in, guarantee with FDI Insurance, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, that our deposits were good and safe, right? Remember those days? After January, they changed the terminology where we now have become unsecured lenders. That's where the word bank bail-in came. Basically, let me make it real simple. Or here's my favorite, reverse hypothecation. Reverse hypothecations means they take it out of your pocket or bank account and put it in theirs. Imagine that there is a psyop going on now to get people mentally primed for a cyber attack on banks. And so all the money that's in banks, I think it's like, let's say $16-17 trillion right now. At least that's how much is in the IRAs, KEOs, and I'm not saying total, but just in those. Let's say they have a cyber attack and they claim that some third party or some third world or some group of hackers has succeeded in taking all the money out of everyone's bank accounts. Now, if people think that that's way off, they should look at every single database that has been violated in the last couple years. It doesn't matter if it's Target, doesn't matter if it's Office Personnel Management, doesn't matter if it's federal employees, state employees, doesn't matter wherever you have data or data stored, those have been penetrated. So here's a question, Sheila. What's stopping them who can do that on supposedly some secured, impenetrable, firewalled system from doing that to the banking system? What's stopping them?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the global financial system, along with dozens of respected economists, Steve, are telling us that now is the time for the end of our current form of money and the beginning of a transition into a new monetary system that is expected to be backed by gold. So I say to people, will you wait until it's too late to make a decision on how you're going to protect your wealth? I mean, you're not going to be able to function within the new monetary system, but people don't understand, Steve, this is a rigged casino. It's a Ponzi scheme and the jig is up. And this whole manipulation, I mean, it reeks of desperation, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, but also control. And it's like this: when cattle have a big field to range in, okay, and I'm using their term, they see us as basically cattle just being prepared for the chutes, okay, and obviously the slaughterhouse. And by the way, I no longer, as you know, I believe that my definition of the involvement of the United States government and all the horrific things going on with ISIS and everything, we lost the color white a long time ago. That would make it, by the way, even the rainbow being projected on the White House, I think, is a direct fulfillment of my statement from years ago. The White House will turn into the slaughterhouse.
Yes.
And I still stand by that statement. But when we're talking about the financial realm, I fought with this for 25 years in my own mind, so let me give you kind of, I think, a human nature understanding that I really believe the Lord helped me to come to grips with. Because when you say how, here it is. It's present in our society totally. People do not want personal responsibility. They don't want to take personal responsibility even with their money, so they're willing to turn it over to the magician that promises them whatever they're being promised in the form of a return. Well, let me make it simple. When someone invests, let's say, in a market and they turn it over to whatever group, whoever group it is, that group will take that money and invest it to the benefit of the corporation, the company, the investment firm, the banking firm, whatever. So I say, Sheila, give me all your money, and let's say it's $100,000, and I'm making this up. So I'm going to give you, ready for this? I'm going to give you a 1% return, if you're a banker, sub 1%, or if you're in the market, let's say a 6%. So I'm going to give you $6,000 or $500 a month. Meanwhile, I'm going to take your $99,500 a month, and I'm going to churn it. I'm going to basically bake it. Baking means to put it into a hot money market. I'm going to do everything I can to make as much money for me as I can, because basically here, and they don't say this, but this is what it turns out to be, because you're too lazy or stupid to take charge of your own money, we're going to take your money from you and make you think you're getting a good deal. So somebody just gave $99,000, and this is for illustration purposes only, at a 5% return, they'll make $500, a month. There's something wrong with that program. So personal accountability and responsibility. I have literally talked to people who have lost millions of dollars, and they said, everybody else did. No, the point is that you don't lose the money if you hold. Now, here's something people say. Well, my metals are down from where I bought them. I said, look at the history of the metals. I said, they absolutely are cycling. And I said, you want to be where everyone else isn't. Everyone else is going to be scrambling for the fire door. And it proves my point, but the silver market now is the tightest it's been in years, okay? The very tightest it's been in years. What people don't understand is now the buyer's market is out in what I call the secondary market. Let me explain how metals work. I think there are actually people who think I sell my own personal gold or silver, as most people know. The mines obviously mine the metal. Then the metal is delivered to the smelters and refiners. The smelters and refiners turn the gold, silver, platinum, palladium, whatever, into bars or blanks. On blanks, if they're going to be a coin shape, they pour the bars, or there's poured bars and then there's minted bars, but I won't get into that, either gold, silver. But then the issue becomes, okay, which mint gets it? The Royal Canadian Mint, the U.S. Mint, the Perth Mint in Australia, whoever the mints are, the mints, both private and public, take the raw gold, put it into a form, and sell it to the dealers. Then the dealers sell it to the general public, okay? The idea here is simply this, that there is not enough metals being mined, and this is by design, because you've got to cover your costs of production. So the people who have silver and gold do not want to sell it at these price levels because it's below the cost of production, okay? Now when you hear the news, and you referred to it earlier in our interview about the story that J.P. Morgan's cornered 95% of the commodities market, it should not be a leap of faith for people to understand. If somebody is buying the commodities up and controlling virtual all of them that are available in the market, then they know they're going to go up, and they can dictate how fast and how far they go up. So let's say they've controlled, and by the way, they can do it on margin, okay? So let's say they control $1 trillion, whatever, $1 trillion in the margin requirements. Let's say they have to put up $50 billion or $10 billion. The more they control the market, the more they can set even what they have to put up. So the issue here becomes is that the little guy can't compete with the big guy, obviously, but you can understand what they're doing. They're priming the pump for a huge price move. Now, listen, I've talked to actual Chinese gold traders and people who are the most brilliant men in the world. They say when the Chinese came out and announced they only had so many tons of gold, they bought that more in 2 years. So what they're doing is they're trying to hide the amount of ounces they have, or actually metric tons they have, in order to keep the price suppressed long enough for them to acquire the volume of gold and or silver they want, primarily gold. Same thing with the Russians. So the West has no gold. Obviously, the countries like Germany and Belgium and all the different nations that have requested their gold back and then get stonewalled, I mean, somebody's got to buy that gold. People say, well, where does that gold get purchased? It gets purchased on the open market. Well, how do you purchase gold that isn't there on the open market at levels that no one's selling that gold? So someone will have to step in and sell gold. So the whole thing is that the Illuminati globalists want to cover all avenues apart from them. You follow me? They don't want you to be able to buy, rent, sell, or trade unless you take the mark, and that's what the Bible says. They don't want you to be able to do any of that. So human nature being what it is and the reality of history being what it is, I don't want to, you don't want to, and God's people should not be in a position to be dictated to by those who, number one, want to take their life, want to take everything they own, want to rob their children of their future, want to take the baby parts and sell them on the open market. And what people don't understand is this: garbage in, garbage out. The human genome is being absolutely destroyed. And it's being destroyed by the air we breathe, chemtrails, geoengineering, the water we drink, excreted pharmaceuticals, and we should do a whole show on that sometime. I remember that was either the second or third show I ever did in my whole life on talk radio about not only birth control pills going to the water system and obviously turning men into estrogenated once former males, okay, OFMs, okay, and then the excreted SSRIs and all this stuff, everything from, tranquilizers to sleeping medication. We have become a genetic hodgepodge of worse living through chemistry. Remember, there used to be a statement, better living through chemistry? So now the full court press is on. I think Mike Adams did a beautiful job. That 63,000 people a year, I think that's quoting their own statistics, kill themselves or basically are involved in suicide due to the dependence on those type of drugs, SSRIs. So the point that I'm trying to make is that we're being attacked in every realm. Somebody has to have the freedom, and the only way to have freedom is to be able to operate outside the system.
Well, with everybody misapplying Romans 13, when the clergy response teams tell their, soon-to-be dead sheep, okay, that would be STBDS, soon-to-be dead sheep, to go, and I say this because it forces people to think. If I say soon-to-be dead sheep, it goes over their head. But if I can abbreviate it quickly, and hopefully I did it right that time, then people say, well, what is that STB? You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to provoke a new channel in their brain to think this through with me, because here's the deal. If we are what we eat, and if we are becoming genetically modified, I can tell you, I see now every day in the headlines, I see the bracketing with parentheses of the words of Jesus when he said, if the days weren't shortened, to be no flesh left alive. What that means, God's creation. The devil hates God's creation. Every time the devil sees a man or a woman destroyed, he laughs, because that's one more of God's former image bearers. Listen, we all bear the image, if we're humans, we all bear the image of God, but only through Jesus Christ do we assume that likeness. Okay, we have to be born again. So the point is, we have to be born from above. We have to have a new nature. The old man has to be put under. The new man has to arise, and arise in Jesus Christ, not arise of the technological debauchery of the techno-perverts, okay? Now what do you have? You've got two sides of the singularity warring, basically a combination of many machines, that AI is going to be the worst thing in the world, whether it's Elon Musk or others. Even Hawking is saying that, and then everybody's saying, it's going to be a new dawn. I saw an article I want to address right now. They're going to make the announcement very soon. They found a planet with life on it. At some point they're going to bring out the aliens and all that stuff. And here's where the disconnect goes there. Since I started writing about this stuff, Sheila, I've tried to make people understand that the aliens, the Anunnaki, were nothing more than the fallen angels, which the Bible and history declares time after time after time. People who believe in that will accept the fact that they're aliens, and now that they came and seeded the earth, and through the process of panspermia, we basically are their descendants, and they're coming back to save us from ourselves. That's it in a nutshell. Now, that the Vatican has embraced that, anybody that wants to challenge me on that, go get Tom Horn's book and be intellectually honest enough, Exo Vaticana, to understand where we're headed. Somebody asked me the other day, do I think they'll make the announcement of aliens at the United Nations? I don't think so yet. I think it's not yet time. But guess who has to be taken out of the world in order for aliens to come on the scene? You guessed it, Christians. And by taken out of the world, I don't mean in the rapture. I want to make this clear. As in destroyed, as in absolutely decimated. And Jesus said again, if they hated me, they're going to hate you. Now, let's go to the satanic statue. It's the same people behind the scenes that are funding those type operations that control the money market of the world. For the record, no place in Genesis did say, and God created Federal Reserve notes and saw that they were good. It said that he created the gold of Ophir, and it was good. Since time, and since God is the author of time, and I'm not going to get into quantum physics with anybody on this statement, but I think I can even prove that easily. The point is that you have to recognize that any time God has blessed any nation, the time they lose track, become ungrateful, become perverted, and I'm not just talking perverted in the sexual realm, although, that, by the way, is a whole topic for fallen angels, too. When you understand, ladies and gentlemen, that we are spiritual beings living in a physical body relating to what once usually was a largely material universe, it's all going to change. The gates of hell are opening. So what I tell people on the metals, if you can't touch it, you don't own it. And if you want to, be able to get it now. It's at its all-time, not all-time low, but it's at its recent 5-year low. It's very low. Silver is, But don't expect to pay spot. For instance, when somebody says, Steve, can you get me silver? I say, yeah. What do you want to pay? Well, I want to pay $2 a spot. I said, you can. If I got to pay $5, you're going to pay $6. If I got to pay $4, you're going to pay $5. I'm talking now on silver. The point being is that I see now more people panicked into buying silver at what I would call panic prices than ever before, at least in the last 2 or 3 years, okay? Now, by panic prices, Sheila, I mean that the official spot price. Oh, if you want to wait for the indefinite future, maybe somebody can make good on their sales. But when people panic, it overwhelms the supply chain. And I'm telling you, based on what I see, people are panicked right now, and they want to get out of dollars. So when someone's holding mattress money or they're holding an IRA, a 401k, whatever, they have the ability to switch that into if that's the way they want to do it. I had a lady the other day say, forget all that stuff, Steve. I believe that 70% of something is better than 100% of nothing. Now, there's a practical, common sense woman. She said, 70% of something's better than 100% of nothing. The something would be the metals. The 100% of nothing will be the IRAs, Keoghs, 401ks. You know that there's even laws being proposed that at some point they will take that money and they'll take it and offer the holders of those accounts some new form of a benefit with an interest rate and with no rights of survival. In other words, if some man has $500,000 in his IRA, Keogh, or 401k, the government takes it, the government issues them 4%, 5%, whatever it is, and when that guy passes, that becomes part of the common kitty, goes back to government. That people say, well, that will never happen. I got news for you. Everything that is happening, people said would never happen.
You know, a lot of people ask me, well, what's the best way to protect yourself? Well, when you think about the dollar, the euro, and the fiat currency system entering the new recession and liquidity crisis, the answer really lies in buying gold, no matter what it looks like. I mean, since bullion banks like JP Morgan and Citibank have been for years depressing the paper gold price through thousands of naked short contracts, their goal of pushing the price well below 1,000 per ounce has failed. And now to protect their trillions in risky investments, they're buying both longs and physicals as double hedge for when the price suddenly takes off or when the COMEX loses. But the thing is, the actual physical bullion market, Steve, is telling quite another story. I mean, look at the U.S. Mint. It's sold over 100,000 ounces of American Eagle golds coins so far in July, and it could be one for the records with it going up to about 120. And Silver Eagles, well, the U.S. Mint has given up on trying to keep up with that demand, and they say that the Mint officials, despite the suspension of the deliveries of the Silver Eagles to dealers, they say they're going to resume here next week. But I mean, people cannot look at what's happening because it's all complete manipulation.
I deal and have dealt with for 2-3 decades, different off and on 3 decades, the company I currently deal with, and I just talked to them before I went on your show. The interesting thing is what people don't understand. The U.S. Mint allocates so many Silver Eagles or so many Gold Eagles to each of their primary dealers, of which there's under a dozen. Those primary distributors of each one of those basically has orders that are backed up. So it's conceivable that, let's say, when they release 250,000 Silver Eagles, those are gone the same day because there's already standing orders, okay? And so what's going to be tricky, and here's the biggest thing that nobody talks about, when a cyber attack happens, all the markets, whether it's a COMEX, the way dealers can buy or even anybody can hedge their position, and in other words, ensure their position, is to have access to the electronic markets. If I'm selling you, Sheila, 1,000 ounces of silver, I've got to make sure I can buy 1,000 ounces of silver to make that up, okay? When that connection goes down, meaning through a cyber attack, through a physical attack, there's no longer a mechanism in place to offset risk. There's no longer a mechanism in place to ensure delivery. At that point, anybody who has it will have it, anybody who doesn't. That's not a scare tactic. But you know this, I have yet to hear anybody ever talk about that. I'm not saying I'm the only one, but I have yet to hear anybody talk about that. And I'm willing to be standing corrected because I'll get the guy on with you or get him on with Doug Hagman and let him make that statement, because sometimes I think when you're too far ahead on current events, most people's short-term attention span is so, how should I say this, fractured, that they can't look beyond their immediate image that forms before their eyes. So when we're talking about metals, number one, here, let's just kind of sum it up. There comes a point where there will be no physical metals available due to the fact that there's no way for either the mines or the primary producers of the bullion product to hedge their position. Without a hedge of their position, that means the prices will skyrocket, because then there will be no primary market. There'll only be a secondary market. Then it will be what you have in hand. Now, if you want to trade that, let's say at some point silver's $1,000 an ounce and a cow's $10,000, well, 10 ounces of silver buys you a cow. I think I talked to some ranchers in my store yesterday, and they said, man, some of the cows in Montana are going for $2,500 a head. Now, that's big money, okay? Huge money, when years ago it was $700-800 a head. So the point being is that these are the things that I see on the horizon that I try and articulate. And people say, you're crazy. It's always been this way. Oh, yeah? Have we always had a Marxist, communist dictator in the White House? Have we ever had so many rollover queens in the Republicans? And I better not describe what I mean a rollover queen, but let's just say this. Compromised in every realm. The Republicans have given everything. Why? Because it's like the Senate of Rome. We are a nation that's being invited to our own destruction, but invaded by all of the barbarians, and the barbarians are no longer outside the gates. Good night. They're running the gates. They are running the Senate. They are running the Congress, with minor exceptions and maybe a few exceptions in the Senate, but they're running everything now. And again, if the slaughter of babies being pulled apart and hawked on the open market, if the death of 238, close to 250,000, probably close to that number, veterans means nothing. If the idea that everything you ever hoped for, worked for, it means nothing. If the attitude or the idea that your children do not have a future doesn't mean anything, then you better check yourself into what I call human race rehab and see really what you believe. Because again, we're numbed and dumbed. They're sticking their finger in your eye. They mean the globalists, the Luciferians, and Satanists. The very fact, and do you remember, Sheila, and I don't have it right now, but I think it's on my website, under the prophetic words that God's given to me on my website. I am not a prophet, I'm a watchman. The Bible specifically says that the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy, the testimony of Jesus. But God said, I am against you, America. I'm going to tear down the idols in the middle of your country. Does that maybe sound a little prophetic?
Yes.
It certainly does. The reason God warns his people is that he's willing that none should perish. The people that don't pay attention, who claim to be his, had better check their hearts at the altar. I want to say that again. The people that deny this stuff, that claim to be his children, had better check their hearts at the altar.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And isn't it interesting, on the heels of all this, Steve, the Obama administration, or as I call the jihadist in the slaughterhouse, is pushing to ban Social Security beneficiaries from owning guns if they lack the mental capacity to manage their own disability payments. This is a move the NRA is calling the largest gun grab in American history. Diane Not-So-Feinstein, I call her. It's amazing how these gun-grabbing cronies want to absolutely vilify the veterans. I mean, these are the only guys that could really be instrumental in a combative tactical move. And it's amazing that, and I think about how far we have declined into absolute debauchery, Steve. I mean, America used to be the bastion of freedom and hope. And yet, when I look around, I think if you had told me 20 years ago we would be where we are today, we have a system where the president makes up laws and goes along with the Supreme Court, and Congress rubber stamps his debauchery. And speaking of Congress, didn't we, the people, used to just throw the bums out? And we've evolved into what you said earlier, a perverted, apologetic, weak, slovenly, and gutless society with little to no values regarding anything, any morals, any ethics, any constitution. And it's absolutely frightening, this vilification of our veterans. It's just, it boils my blood, Steve.
Well, it boils your blood because your blood still runs hot with life. It doesn't boil the blood of those who are frozen and basically impaired by their indifference, apathy, ignorance,
willful denial, and basically want to just stay with the status quo. I used to say this, I guarantee you, and I said this years and years ago, so this isn't just, I said, the time will come when it will set in. Sooner or later, people get it, that Jesus isn't coming back for people who are sitting in easy chairs, watching Christian TV, having their pockets pilfered by the pickpockets in the pulpit.
Actually, the word you've used in the past is telepickpocketists. My favorite word.
Well, thank you. And the thing that I think is what we're dealing with now is that we're dealing with reality having been stolen from us, okay? Our future. Now, how do I say reality is stolen from us? When a video game has a $500 million budget, half $1 billion,
yes.
I believe that, and that's the hottest selling video game. You know, if people wanted, if somebody wants to do this who is a listener of yours, and email it to Sheila, and email it to me too if you wouldn't mind, if you were to take the most popular video games and just do maybe a single paragraph summary of each, if you will see the darker and darker, but they're all headed into the supernatural, okay? There's no longer, you know, good guys and bad guys. It's either genetic mutants, and I want to make this clear for everybody. I know nothing about video games. I do not play them except when I read reviews of what they're at, and some of my listeners who are astute look at the electro zombies, okay? Sheila, I watched a guy walk in front of a truck, and thank God the trucker stopped with headphones in. I don't know if he's listening to his, well, he was listening to something and typing something on his telephone, you know?
Good grief.
Yeah, and there's the one you can use too, a telephone, okay? Not a telephone, a telephone, you know? Dial 1-8000 Gehenna. The point is that we're so, how do I say this, the mind control. Now remember, the people that have set this nation up to fall, they understand human nature. They understand that people will take immediate gratification now, and by giving them the immediate gratification, whether it's even intellectual, sexual, you know, for their appetites. I mean, we haven't yet seen, maybe they are existing probably in the underground, but wait until we see the vomitoriums come into, you know, what would you say, public awareness, and people just bragging about going to such and such a restaurant, having 10 different meals. But people say, well, you can't eat that much, because they say, of course not. We go and eat meal one, go in the restroom and purge. Go and that's literally where Rome fell to, okay? And while they were, you know, in the realm of hanky-panky, the Vandals, the Goths, the Ostrogoths, and everybody who came in, they pillaged Rome because while they were playing with each other, these guys knew that, hey, they're toast. We'll just take what we want. And that's exactly what's happened to America. And I want to share something. I don't think people get it. There is a plan to offer up the United States and its citizenry as a nuclear spoil of war. People still don't believe that the whole nuclear issue is valid. If you take a look at what's happened to the U.S. military and our weapon systems, for instance, state-of-the-art battleships and missile cruisers being shut down, aircraft being brought down electronically, the tragedy of submarines being forced to surface. This is stuff that doesn't always hit the news. The argument years ago when the Chinese fired an ICBM from a submarine on the opposite side of Catalina, which would have been the western side of Catalina. I used to dive in Catalina. That's where I got my certification, scuba dive. And the thing is that I had eyewitnesses, and people said, you didn't see what you saw. I had missile commanders saying, yes, that's how we know. We monitor the smoke. We know exactly. Well, you know, and it's not too tough when you see the Chinese writing on the side of it, but, you know, I was told, no, that was a Learjet. That was this, that was that. No, it was basically came out from under the water, you know. I've watched Learjets. They usually don't come out underwater of Catalina. So the tragedy is that I think there's a group of people sitting around and say, how big a lie can we get these people to believe? Now, here's what I want to share, because we're getting close to the end of the story. Man, this is the longest introduction I've ever had. When I say introduction, we're just getting started. But here's the deal. The silver market and the gold market, that's how people have lived for 6,000 years. The Sumerians, the Babylonians obviously sought it, obviously traded with it. The idea that God made it is still based on his equity and just measures. The other issue is when people say to me, well, you can't eat it. You can take 1 ounce of gold right now, let's say it's about $1,200 with all the commissions, fees and everything. And you can go to Argentina, if you want to, choose to Paraguay, Uruguay. You can go to Latin America. You can go overseas, not Tokyo, because Tokyo, the food is so expensive. But in any non-metropolitan place, you can buy enough food to probably feed yourself for $1,200 for at least 2 months. Okay, and that's in Argentina. That's eating steak dinners every night, and so there are charts and people have done that. So the thing is that people say, well, you can't do that. You want to bet you have a better chance of getting anything with gold from foreigners or in this country than you will with paper money, especially when it's just been devalued. I don't believe, Sheila, they'll devalue the currency immediately in September, but very soon it's going to come. I think it was Jim Rawls said, cash will be king and then cash will be trash. But the average person that cannot access, and I want to leave them with this, okay? If you can't access your credit card, debit card, or bank account, how long can you live? How much food do you have in your pantry? Listen, the places that sell survival supplies, for years I was one of the biggest survival stores in the country. There were times when we were doing numbers that were off chart. And guess what? If 400 to 500 people panicked at one time in one day, all of the survival stores that are out there, the biggest ones, would be empty. They'd be empty. So the point that I'm trying to make to everybody is simply this. What you're going to get quickly. Get the silver. I have silver. People say, well, how come you have it and nobody else has it? How come you have it in stock and nobody else has it? Because I'll pay what I have to get to satisfy my clients who say, I don't care what it costs. I want it. Now, when I say I don't care what it costs, I mean, it's all within reason. But like I said, if I've got to pay more, the client will have to pay more. And that's what makes me different than most of the people in the silver and gold market, because they count on a normal market being on the horizon. I never account on that. So I think people have to go into what I call combat realization of the precious metals and acquire the silver. Silver is for barter. Gold is for, say, long-term or heavy value purchases. And there'll come a time, Sheila, where that's the only way the Christians will be able to operate outside of the system.
Yes. And the bottom line is, don't focus on the manipulated numbers. Don't listen to the rhetoric with these spin-doctored, bought and paid for, lamestream talking bobbleheads. No matter what it looks like, buying gold is a smart move, folks. It's a prudent move, especially with the storm clouds looming overhead. Don't wait. Now is the time, and with these large preparedness companies reporting depletions in supplies, like Steve said, when there's a panic, everything flies off the shelf. Don't wait till then. Get a hold of Steve Quayle for all your metals needs and talk to him about your preparedness needs, whether it's food or whatever, because he knows the best people in the business. But don't wait. The time really is to act now, isn't it, Steve?
Yes, it is. And they can call my store, 406-586-4842, or they can send me an email, steve777@stevequayle, QUAYLE.com, and just put up in the subject and give me your phone number, because I can call you. You can't lock in on the computer now because the prices are so sporadic and availability is difficult. So just put metals and your phone number if you want me to call you. I would tell everyone this too, Sheila, and I know we're right at the top of the hour, that they cannot and should not. If someone's looking at their last $400 or $500, everybody should be looking at food, because when the FEMA camps are open, the way people are going to be drawn into them or forced into them is because they're going to be hungry. And the monsters that are will take advantage of that. They may give you a free meal, but ultimately, for whatever use they have for you, and I pray that people don't sell their soul for a MRE, just like basically, who do we know that did that? Esau, right?
Right. And people have to remember, it's amazing what people will do when they're hungry. Don't sell your soul is right. Steve, thank you so much for coming on the program tonight and sharing this valuable information.
Well, blessings to you, Sheila, and thank God for the job you're doing. And ladies and gentlemen, get her book. It is amazing, and the idea is that she nailed it. People don't understand that the pale horse is Kleros, the green movement. Even though it's a total lie, it's also the total motivation of these people, and ultimately, it's your life they want. Sheila, God bless. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Steve. Folks, that was Steve Quayle from stevequayle.com. Get a hold of him. Please do get prepared. Folks, get a copy of my book, which is on Amazon.com, Green Gospel. It is available on Amazon.com. Visit my book website, greengospel.ca. In fact, Steve wrote one of the reviews for it, as well as Dr. Tom Horn, Paul McGuire, and New York Times bestselling author Christopher C. Horner. It is an important book. I believe that the hand of God is on it, and I want to get it in people's hands. So, greengospel.ca. Check out my book website. We had a fantastic program this week, including, back from his missions trip to Ecuador, Augusto Perez this Friday. It's going to be great. Thank you for tuning into the broadcast tonight. Good night, and God bless.